Alright guys, we need to talk because we have a massive retirement problem in the United States. The median retirement savings for Americans between 55 and 64 years old currently sits at about $164,000. This is far below the 10 to 12 times your yearly income that's recommended by experts. And if you ask me, 10 to 12 times is far too low. But before we get into all this, how did we get here? So long story short, the modern retirement wasn't anything we were planning for in the first place, especially one that lasted 20 to 30 years. Retirement is actually a relatively new concept that can be traced back to 1875 when the first pension plan was established by the American Express Company. Basically, American Express and the other companies who provided early pensions were looking to get rid of their elderly workplace in favor of younger and sharper employees. But they couldn't just oust them with nothing, so they created a pension that could pay them while they were out of the job. Now, this might seem like an amazing deal, but these pensions didn't actually work like the ones we see in modern times. It wasn't like the pension providers were shelling out enough cash to keep their ousted workforce comfortable for decades, playing golf and hanging out by the pool. The average pension age was 65 and the life expectancy at that time was as low as 41. This means you were unlikely to make it to your pension, and companies like Amex were paying it to a small portion of their workforce. But just like a lot of things in history, all things changed after the Great Depression. With unemployment skyrocketing but lifespans increasing, the United States needed a way to take care of its aging workforce. So here came a new retirement plan called Social Security. When established, Social Security set the retirement age to 65 as well. This allowed older retirees with no jobs and likely no pension due to sky-high unemployment rates to be able to retire. But there was an issue with this plan under the surface. Life expectancies at the time were 58 and climbing fast. In fact, they reached the age of 70 by 1960. This would put America in a pickle as we now had more retirees than our programs could support or frankly bargain for. So the next major change came with the Revenue Act of 1978. This act established the 401k that now allows Americans to save for retirement either tax deferred or with taxes up front. Employers could also reduce their tax burden by providing these programs and eventually even contributing themselves to the employee's retirement. This was simply an amazing plan. Now Americans would receive major incentives for saving for their increasingly long retirements. But unfortunately, this plan came with two big problems. First off, Americans weren't putting their savings aside for retirement and as a result have been left with insufficient retirement funds. On the other hand, pension plans slowly disappeared in favor of tax-advantaged 401ks. This leads us into the retirement dilemma we have today. As we've become conscious of this epidemic, there's been a recent push by the financial community to make sure Americans have the information they need to save properly for retirement. Partially thanks to this push and increase in information, many Gen Zs and Millennials are now saving more and preparing better to live those later years. Now from our story earlier, you can see that most of our problems have been due to the increase in lifespans. So the better question to ask isn't how much do I need in retirement, but rather how much do I need in retirement to survive 20 to 30 plus years comfortably. This little add-on is an important detail that the United States government and businesses failed to consider in the century leading up to now. We'll address this in this video by focusing on our withdrawal rate and asking how much do we desire to withdraw each year of retirement and how much should we save to do that effectively. When we think about our withdrawal rate, it's important for us to understand what our safe withdrawal rate or SWR is. In a nutshell, your safe withdrawal rate is the amount of money you can withdraw in retirement without running out of money. This is often represented as a percentage of your portfolio. For example, if your SWR is 4% and you have $1 million in retirement, you can withdraw $40,000 a year. Another common way to represent SWR is using the constant dollar method. You determine that you'd like to withdraw $40,000 a year indefinitely no matter where your account is. There are a bunch more withdrawal strategies, but today we'll be using a combination of these two mentioned to determine our SWR. And honestly, unless you're truly interested, there's no need to overcomplicate the process with fancy strategies. While there is an SWR we should aim for, it doesn't look exactly the same for everyone, and a few factors should go into determining it. $1 million sounds great right now, but have you thought about how long that $1 million will last? We first need to consider your age combined with the amount you have in retirement. The younger you retire, the more money you need to have in your portfolio. With the FIRE movement taking off, or formerly known as the Financial Independence Retire Early, Many Americans are choosing to retire at younger ages. This means they'll need their money to last far longer than some of their peers. The next thing to think about is inflation. Inflation significantly lowers the value of money over the course of time. $1 million today will not be worth the same in 20 years. If you assume a 3% inflation rate, then that $1 million could be worth $548,000 in retirement, for example. So you want to make sure your money will continue to grow and keep up with inflation during retirement. Next, we don't like to think about it, but your lifestyle. Some of us may live more frugally while others like to spend. This will affect your withdrawal rate and how much you need to save in retirement. Planning to travel the world or go on lavish vacations? You're gonna need to save a bit more. But lastly is the most important factor, which is the return on your investments. You need to pick an investment portfolio that can provide you a return in retirement. This will offset the amount of money you're taking out and make sure you can continue to withdraw that amount without running out. It also allows us to keep up with inflation and maybe even grow a little bit. At the same time, it might not be the best to be 100% invested in stocks. Keeping a bit of cash and a percentage in bonds can help your portfolio stay afloat when things are not doing great in the market. But investments are for another video, as there are many considerations. For now, let's understand that having more in bonds provides a lower return but reduces your risk in the market. So a bad year won't have as much of a hit on your portfolio and allows you to worry less. Cash also mitigates that risk as well. As you get closer to retirement, it's recommended to talk to a trusted financial advisor and weigh these options. Advisors aren't necessary in all stages of life, but when reaching retirement age, they can do a lot to help you preserve your nest egg. To illustrate this, I'll introduce a boring and not so fun concept called the sequence of return risk. Sequence of return risk, who my friend Dave Ramsey doesn't really believe in, is the risk that you'll run out of money. This risk is especially important right before you hit retirement and right after you start retirement. If you've done some research on investing, you probably know that the stock market to this point has returned an average of about 8 to 12% a year. You also know that you need to account for inflation. So you might think that if inflation will average 3%, you could withdraw 9% of your portfolio without eroding it. But the sequence of return risk says that the market doesn't return the same 12% a year, and we need to account for years where we might see a lower return or even a recession. So simply accounting for inflation and withdrawing 9% a year won't work. But blah blah blah, that's just a bunch of numbers. Show me a real world example. So let's see how sequence of return risk can drastically alter your financial future. Say the year is 2007 and you reach the ripe age of 65 and are ready to live your dream life. You have $1 million in retirement and decide you want to withdraw a nice 9% a year. You heard that the market returns 12% a year on average, but you're educated and understand you need to account for inflation. You assume a 3% average inflation and bring your withdrawal rate down to 9%. At this rate, you'll take out at least $90,000 a year and never run out of money. A recipe for a great retirement, right? But the next year is the Great Recession and the S&P 500 is down nearly 40%. Your portfolio is now $600,000. Yeah, that hurts, but you tell yourself it's okay. It's not the $90,000 you expected, but $54,000 a year is good enough, you tell yourself. And luckily for you, the market recovers 23% the first year. Now you have a little cushion and you can withdraw the same 9% and your portfolio is still growing. And we look to the next year, the return was 12% and your portfolio is still growing and keeping up with inflation. But head into year 4, well, the return was 0% on your portfolio. In fact, your return varied dramatically year over year. The average S&P 500 return from 2008 to 2018 ended up being 6.3%. Not only did your portfolio not return the same 12% you were promised, but it actually went down an average of 2.7% a year and now is only worth $582,394. This means you're kind of in a huge hole. You never recovered from 2008 and may have 20 years left in retirement. Whoops. This estimation is the very reason that experts recommend a 3 to 4% withdrawal rate. Retiring in 2008 was the worst timing in 80 years, but it shows that the extreme is possible. The year you retire has a dramatic effect on the end balance of your portfolio, but at a 3 to 4% withdrawal rate, you have the best historical chance of withdrawing without running out of money or getting too low to live. So now that we have this information, let's do an exercise and see if we can design a retirement plan that will get us to retirement. The point of this exercise is to help you think through the retirement process and then set your goals accordingly. In this exercise, we'll get aggressive and look at someone that is a member of the FIRE movement. This has been a popular movement over the past decade where young people are rejecting the tradition of retiring when they're older and instead choosing to retire as soon as possible. People are retiring at 40 or even as low as 30. Doing so will allow members of the FIRE movement to focus on the other things life has to offer. Things such as family and friends, hobbies, or taking vacations and seeing the world. FIRE buys you freedom, but there are a lot of considerations to make when retiring early. When you decide to retire early, you have to consider a few factors. The first is your time horizon. You are no longer looking at 20 to 30 years in your retirement window. You could now be retired for 40 to even 60 years. You need to make sure your money can last. Let's say we retire at 40 and plan to live until 90. In order to maintain our lifestyle, we will withdraw a minimum of $50,000 a year, but aim to only withdraw 4% of our portfolio as it grows. And as a note, we have a fairly aggressive portfolio as well. It's about 80% stocks, 15% bonds, and 5% cash. To start us on the right foot, let's plan to have about $1.25 million when we retire so that we can withdraw $50,000 minimum without going over 4%. Based on the sequence of return risk, we have an 88.3% chance of success with this portfolio. And by success, we mean making it to the end of retirement while still having money to survive. Not too bad, but the general rule of thumb is to have a success rate of 90% or more. Personally, I would prefer no chance of having nothing before I die, so we need to do one of two things. First thing we can do is simply retire with more money. Upping our portfolio to $1.6 million and withdrawing the same dollar amount gets us just to 100% success. Alternatively, at the age of 40, you may still have the desire to work, but just not as much. So here, we can plan on having some extra income in retirement as well. We decide to only save $1.25 million, but at the same time vow to work a part-time job until we're about 60 and make $20,000 a year. And we didn't adjust for inflation here, as we don't want to worry about pay raises and job changes while we're retired. This change also gets us to a 100% success rate in our portfolio. All of this shows there are a number of ways to achieve FIRE and design a portfolio that fits your needs. Based on your lifestyle, you may need to reduce or increase your minimum withdrawal rate. You may even need to work a part-time job as you're going through your, quote, retirement. You can also just adjust your retirement age. Choosing a more traditional retirement of 59.5 and effectively lowering your retirement duration to 30 years, this changes the success rate of our portfolio to 96.7%. $1.4 million is what you would need to get to 100% in this scenario. So in summary, aim for a lower withdrawal rate. History shows us that a 3 to 4% withdrawal rate is safe. The Trinity study will show you some success rates to prove this. Next, make sure you have enough in retirement to truly live the way you want to live before you retire. There are multiple examples of 20 to 40% declines in the market in the recent past. That example could unfortunately be us in the future. While there are many steps you can take to determine a safe withdrawal rate, there are a few limitations. Despite what the numbers tell us, we really don't know what may happen early or late into retirement. It's important that you're ready to alter your investments or get the right people in your corner to help you when the time comes. Make sure you're talking to a financial advisor if you're getting closer to retirement. Find one that you can trust and has a sound financial philosophy. They can help you diversify your portfolio, and having so will help you hedge against market declines. For example, keeping a healthy amount of bonds and cash can make you less susceptible to stock market declines. And don't forget, be wary of when you retire. Is it 2022 and the market is down 20%? Maybe wait a year or two before you retire if you can, or plan to work just enough to offset the hit to your portfolio. And if you've already retired, reevaluate your plan. Will you make it to the desired end? Do you need to work just a little bit to help keep you afloat? How has the recent inflation affected your buying power? Taking these steps can get you back on the right track. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the links in the description below, as there are resources there that I personally use or would use in specific situations.